Okay. So I'm working on this novel, right? Been working on it for a while. Uh, and it's all revisions at this point. And it's interesting. I've never put this much work into revising and updating anything before. And a novel is certainly a very large piece of work. And so that adds complications. But it just like, it's not like what I thought it would be like. I am losing track of drafts not because there's so many, but because it's hard to define what a draft is, right? Like if I'm going through and just polishing little words, is that a new draft? Is that updating an old draft? If I go in and add entire scenes or remove entire chapters or reshuffle things, like at what point is it a draft? And I don't know anymore. I can't tell. But in going through this process, I'm starting to experience something I'm calling revision fatigue. I don't know if there's an actual term out there for this phenomenon, but I am getting kind of tired of my novel. And it's not actually, I love this novel. I have to say, I really love it. And I'm really excited to finish it. And I love sharing it with people. And I think it's an enjoyable read. And I think it's only going to get better. But when I say revision fatigue, what I mean is the way I have been revising it is I start at the beginning and I read, and then I come across something like, oh, that doesn't work, and I change it. And then I go through the rest of the novel and change all the things that have to be changed. And then it's like, I guess I better take it from the top again. I start back at the beginning. And so the middle of the novel, I haven't spent very much time in because I just can't seem to get to it. And the beginning of the novel, I can't even read anymore. Anytime I start to read it, my mind wanders off because it's like the millionth time I'm reading it, and I just can't stay focused. And so I felt sort of stuck. And so I've needed to find ways to remove myself, I guess, to try to make it fresh for me, to find a different way to look at it. And so I've come up with two techniques that I want to share with you for combating revision fatigue. One is using word count. So I went through, this is, I guess, a couple drafts ago, depending on how you want to count. And I just took the individual word count of each chapter. I've been watching the word count of the whole novel as long as I've been working on it, but I didn't know how the different chapters were. I put it all into a spreadsheet, each chapter, its word count, and graphed it out, and then looked for outliers, right? Why is this chapter so much longer than average? Why is this one so much shorter than average? What's going on there? Friends have told me my pacing is off. Maybe this is how I can start to identify problems. It's really interesting. It seems I actually have a pretty intuitive grasp of 1,500 words. That seems to be a Kyle chapter. That was the average, almost all of the chapters the first time I did this seemed to be between 1,200 and 1,700 words. They were just all in there somewhere, with a few exceptions. There were a couple that were really short. And when I looked at those, almost 100% of the time, they were either underwritten and missing details that I then went in and added, and suddenly they came to that average, or they were just arbitrarily chopped off and I lost nothing by combining them with another chapter. Often these two short chapters would be right beside each other, and I put them together and I'd have 1,500 word chapter. And so that was interesting. But there were two chapters I just couldn't, they were double. They were both right around 3,000 words, and they were both pretty important chapters, and nothing about them seemed overwritten or indulgent. But they were single scenes, and there was no good way to divide them in half. And so I guess I'll just have these two double chapters, like the season finale of a TV show, right? Except in the middle. But I did some looking around a little bit ago, and I found a web page. I'll link to it in the description, about average word count of chapters in novels, which is useful. And it turns out 3,000 to 5,000 words is typical for a novel chapter across genres. And so I'm running at about half of that. And normally I wouldn't care. I'd just say, oh, whatever, I'm a 1,500 word guy. But in a previous episode, when I talked about Ifat, this agent that I really want to secure, she asks for your first 3 chapters. And in order to get the action into the first 3 chapters that I wanted, I ended up condensing actually 7 now chapters into 3. Previously I said 6, but I've added another one in there. And I cut a whole bunch, and they average now between 2,500 and 3,000 words. And it just seemed weird and disingenuous to have my first 3 chapters be in the 2,500 to 3,000 word range, and then all the rest of the chapters in the book to be right around 1,500. So I went through and I started looking for ways to combine chapters and looking for new ways to divide them up. And I've now completed that process. I have roughly half as many chapters as I had before. And this was actually really helpful. I found a whole bunch of areas where it's like, actually, there are sort of duplications here, right? If I combine these 2 chapters together, these 2 different conversations can become one conversation. These 2 different scenes can become one scene, and the whole thing becomes a lot more efficient. And my friends, my pre-readers have all told me, like, Kyle, you got to get to the point. Kyle, the pacing is weird. It's fast, and then it's slow, and it's bumpy, and it's weird. And this has really helped me identify a lot of those. Just like the first time around, I could see the outliers and iron them out. Combining them all together, I'm doing that again. But I still have this problem where, like, now I don't know if any of these, all of my chapters, they might be totally incoherent, right? They might feel like multiple chapters smushed together. And how am I supposed to identify that? And so revision fatigue again, like, all right, I have a new chapter structure. I sit down to read starting at chapter 1 and just like, oh, I cannot read these again. And so my newest technique, I list out the chapters. There are 27 of them now. And I found a online random number generator. It's like random.com or random.org or .net or something like that. And I just put in numbers 1 through 27 and then told it to shuffle them, and it put them in a random order for me. And I dropped those into a spreadsheet. And now that's the order I'm reading the chapters in. And I'm taking each chapter and treating it as though it's its own little standalone short story almost. I mean, not totally independent of the rest, because that would be weird. But like, I understand the novel well enough. I wrote it that I get the context, but I can just take each chapter and read it and see how it holds up. And this has been working really well for me. I've gotten through 10 chapters this way, and I just started a couple days ago. And it works so great because, like, after I read a chapter, I have that excitement of what's going to happen next, right? Because I know exactly what would happen next if I read the next chapter chronologically. But I'm not reading the next chapter chronologically. After I finish reading a chapter, and I sort of do light revisions as I go through, ironing out little things that are weird. And then I go to my spreadsheet, and next to the chapter, I put the new word count, so I can continue tracking that, and then notes like, oh, this is going to need more work in the future, or oh, I have quite, this part isn't clear. Just anything I want to come back to later, I want to remember. And then I look at the next line of the spreadsheet, and it says, oh, I just read chapter 11. Now I'm going to read chapter 24. I wonder what chapter 24 is, and it brings that excitement back and makes it feel like it's new and fresh while I'm deep in what is probably very reasonably a draft number 4 or 5. So that's how I'm combating revision fatigue. I hope that's helpful to you. And yeah, talk later.